Go ahead, call the meeting to order. Alderman Johnson, will you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Steve Jarvis,
Here.
Bill Miner,
Yes, on the phone.
Jim Peterson,
Present.
Don Johnson.
Here.
Okay, does anyone have any conflicts of interest in anything that has been represented on the agenda? Let's move into the consent calendar. Approval of 6/22/2020 agenda, approval of 6/8/2020 meeting minutes, approval of 6/9/2020 special meeting minutes, and approval of claims. Any discussion?
Mayor,
Yes, Alderman Minor?
the minutes weren't included in the digital packet. And I'd also like to move the invoice for Great Plains Structures for $6,200 to an action item.
Okay. We'll make that action item 7A.
Are the minutes,
I have them.
can we get them?
Yeah.
Since we gotta approve
I
them?
don't know why they were not in there.
Okay. Stacia's gonna get them. And Bill will make sure we get them to
Ma'am?
you. Yes?
I read it in the Prevailer.
Okay.
Thank you, Gray.
We will make sure you get a copy though.
Which one is he moving to action items?
Great Plains.
What's the Jim? It's just select.
6,000.
Hold one, right there. Page.
What page is on?
It is on,
Page two of the claims. About halfway down, a little more than halfway down.
Okay. Alderman Minor, so just to note, that is for the invoice total $6,200, Great Plains Structure, 6/22/20, and it's a 6/9/20 repair leak tower.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That'll be action item 7A1. And Stacia's just coming back with the minute.
Thank you.
Bill, since you've seen them in the Prevailer, would it be all right for us to send them to you electronically after the meeting?
I already sent it to him.
Oh, okay, sorry, they're already on their way.
thanks, Stacia.
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Man,
Thank you.
okay, I'll give you guys a few minutes to take a look at this. like just another minute. All right, everyone has had a chance to take a look at them. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion Alderman Jarvis, is there a second?
Second.
Second Alderman Johnson, any discussion? Roll call vote, please, Stacia.
Jim Peterson,
Yep.
Bill Miner,
Yes.
Don Johnson,
Yep.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Motion carries. Public comment. Members of the public may speak on any matter that is not on the agenda. We ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes per speaker. If anyone would like to address the council, please come up, take the stadium, state your name. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on into action items. Action item 7A1, invoice for Great Plains for $6,200. Discussion? So Brett, can you?
Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, Alderman Minor.
Yes, could I get an explanation of this invoice?
Okay, so I was just gonna look to Brett to provide us with some context.
So over the winter, there was, and I'm not sure as to when, but into the fall and winter, there was a leak that developed in the big blue standpipe on the high side of the system. And it was too late in the season to fix it because there was already ice that was forming within the tank. So we had to wait till the spring to get it repaired. Typically, we utilize Midco, and they provide divers that come in and fix the tank from the interior. And they tend to use an epoxy resin, whatever. And their work really isn't guaranteed. And we've used Great Plains in the past. They do an exterior fix. We thought it was just like 1 or 2 leaks that were up on the tower. It actually turned out that there were about 8 to 10 leaks that they took care of. So I think that is the reason why it's a little bit larger than what it is as far as cost. But they do guarantee their work, so if we have a problem in that same location, we can get them back out here.
Okay? Any questions?
So, Mayor,
Yep, Alderman Minor, you have the floor.
so the invoice is dated June 9th. When did the work take place?
I don't know the exact date. Looks like Stacia
Stacia's
might be able to
here,
find that
we're
out.
gonna look for it.
I know that they did the work probably about 3 weeks ago, if I remember correctly.
How many weeks?
About 3 weeks ago.
Was this an emergency or non-emergency repair?
Because of the leak, we had to lower the levels in that tank. Normally we have it running at, in the summertime we run it at about 118 feet. And I think we had to drop it down below that leak so that we weren't losing water. And I think it was at 108 or 9. So considering that we needed to gear up for summer to make sure we had that extra water and the demand, I would consider it an urgent thing to get taken care of.
And the date of repairs was June 4th.
So this, if I understood correctly, you said this was an emergency repair.
It's something that, something happened after the fall, winter had started, couldn't get repaired then. And then, we're gearing up for the season, and that was the first that they could come out and get it taken care of, so.
Okay. Was there a contract signed for this project?
I'm not sure, I don't think so. I know that we've done business with them in the past, so I know we have an account set up with them. That's where we bought our last tank that we replaced up at the shop for the low side. I don't remember a contract that was signed for it.
Did we get an estimate?
I don't believe so. I think the discussion that the Public Works Director had with Great Plains, and he did discuss things with Midco, was just related, we thought we had 1 or 2 leaks. I don't think there was a discussion about having 8 to 10.
But they wouldn't know, would they know that before they got into the tank, or would that be something that could only be discovered upon the divers in? I don't know if some of that, the extent of it, could have been known before the company came out here to do the repairs.
Actually, I told, they identified 14 leaks.
Brett, would you just read that so it's into the record, please?
Sure. This is to Travis Kettner, our Public Works Director. Dear Travis, Kevin Mortimer, an Aquastore technician with Great Plains Structures, was on site last Thursday, June 4th, conducting leak repairs in the Hill City water stand pipe. Kevin identified 14 leaks between 30 and 112 feet. He was able to stop the leaking at each location, and one location in particular had visible ice damage to the tank sidewall at the location of the overflow support bracket. The sidewall sheet was deformed, and he needed to install wood shims in the same area created by ice damage. He also noticed the integrity of the roof has been compromised in some areas due to the weight of the antennas mounted on the roof. It does not appear to affect the performance of the tank at this time. Just wanted to make sure that you're aware of it. We have attached some pictures to reflect the deflection of the roof's panels due to the weight of the antennas. We understand you will be installing a mixer and possibly a heater to eliminate the icing that has been occurring in this tank. It is likely that the ice mitigation will prevent future leaks from occurring. However, the deformed sheet area and those areas that have been damaged by previous ice may still encounter leaking issues. The tanks expand and contract under normal service operations, which will continue to challenge the area that was deformed by the ice and other potentially damaged areas. If the leaks continue in this area, it may be needed to address by replacing the sheet. Let's keep an eye on this area and be prepared to monitor the ice condition this winter. Thank you for your opportunity to service your tank.
Brett, I'm sorry, what was the footage on that?
So they identified 14 leaks between the 30-foot mark and the 112-foot mark.
Brett, who typically does our tank, our water tower
So
tank
for
repair?
for several years, we've used Midco service, and typically they're bringing in their divers, and they dive into the interior of the tank and do their inspection and whatnot. Great Plains, I know, does. They have a big, what is it called, a telemetry boom truck or whatever, that they put the guy up on the exterior of the tank. He's looking for leaks from that part of it, and then it's a bolted glass lined tank, and so he's there to retighten, re-epoxy, those bolt holes.
So, and you said, as a side note, Bill, you have any more questions? I have a side note.
Yeah.
We could let Bill finish, he has the floor. Go ahead, Alderman Minor.
So, we had no estimate or no contract for an emergency repair that was done on June 4th. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of a contract, no. So the repairs were conducted. There was discussion that was occurred with Midco. One of the issues associated to Midco is that they don't guarantee their work. If it leaks again, we gotta call them back and they refix it and they're gonna recharge us. With Great Plains, if they fix it, it is under warranty, it is guaranteed. Again, I think the discussion is that we've got a couple of leaks, not 14 leaks. So,
I have no problem with the vendor. I have no problem fixing the tank. My questions are coming out of the fact that someone authorized $6,200 in expenditures, which department heads have $1,000 authority, city administrator has $2,000 authority, and finance officer has $3,000 authority. Section 2.15 of our policy manual has a specific section for emergency purchases. And it says they must be authorized by the city finance officer, the city administrator, mayor, and president or vice president of the council, and reported at the next city regularly scheduled council meeting. Signatures shall be required and obtained within 72 hours of the emergency purchase to document that proper purchasing authorization was obtained. So did we follow the procedures for emergency purchase as outlined in section 2.15 of our policy manual?
So I think the missing element that we have here is I don't know that we have a hard number of what it was gonna cost before they did the work. So again, it was on the premise that we had like 2 locations that had leaks in it that would have probably fell within that $3,000 spending limit. And then it exceeded that. So if that's what's occurring here in the field, and then it turns into $6,000, you know, that is a problem. Then we're technically in violation of the emergency purchase rules of the personnel policy manual.
If there's an emergency, it wouldn't matter what the amount is, should it have followed the same procedure, even though people have certain spending?
That's correct.
And whenever you found out it was going to exceed the dollar amount, people should have been notified.
No, I'm talking before that. If it was deemed an emergency, should it have followed that procedure? Whether it's $500 or 5,000 or 15,000.
Yeah, there was definitely an urgency to get the
Mhm.
repairs made because we're moving into the summer season and the demand for water. I don't know what the exact number that was quoted. It was an operational decision. I guess if there's anybody to blame for it, that would be me. I didn't know it was gonna be $6,000
Sure.
until we get the invoice.
So my question though is, if it's deemed an emergency, should that procedure be followed? Doesn't matter what people have for spending limits, should that procedure?
If we know that that cost is gonna be $6,000, you bet.
Still not answering my question.
Okay.
If it's an emergency, that supersedes the fact that you guys have spending limits and should follow the emergency procedure, whether it's $500, 5,000, or 15,000. Is that, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't have any issue with this deal, but if there's a policy and you guys need to follow it, then
Right.
it's just a point of,
Yeah,
you know, if you're thinking that we're following under
yeah.
our spending limits, but it's an emergency.
Right, so if there's an emergency, and that means, so the way that was written in the personnel policy, it's essentially an emergency that we can't wait till the next council meeting to
Sure.
get approval. That's what classifies it as an emergency. The other test for it, supposedly, if you want to use that word, the test is the $3,000 spending authority. If we know that it's going to exceed that, and a good example is last year we had infiltration coming in on Allen Gulch from that line from the Forest Service for the sewer line. And so what we did was then we, just like Alderman Minor said, we made phone calls to the mayor. I believe you, Mayor,
Yep,
were
that's me.
the council president at the time. It was communicated out. We got the authorizations. We knew that it was going to exceed, that $3,000 spending limit. I don't know that we knew that it was gonna be $6,000 on this bill until we actually received the bill.
So it's still not answering my question. My question is, when it's deemed an emergency, or otherwise it could have waited till the next council meeting, doesn't matter what the dollar amount is, there's a policy that it should follow.
Well, anything below 3,000, whether it's an emergency or not, we would proceed with it. The emergency only kicks in if it's more than $3,000.
Is that the way the policy reads?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the policy would specifically have to state, this supersedes any other process or authority in order to
Do you see what I'm
require that it
asking?
be done your way, right?
Because once it's deemed an emergency, then those people should get involved. I think what I'm sensing, I don't know if this is right, but it doesn't feel like those people were involved
Right.
in this case.
Correct.
Because you guys are thinking it might be below, but if it's an emergency,
Right.
I don't know, I'll read it. What section is it in?
2.15.
It's page 22 of our policy manual. And Alderman Peterson is correct. It specifically states under spending authorities, the daily maximum for the purpose of acquiring goods and services routinely used for daily city operations. So by it being classified emergency, then the section of emergency purchases applies, and it says any emergency purchases exceeding established city guidelines or authorities must be authorized by, as I read.
So it's being classified right now based on what I heard and understand, and I'm just saying this so I get it clear in my mind. It's being classified as an emergency repair because a decision needed to be made before the next council meeting occurred. However, is it really a true emergency situation if the issue to the tank developed and we had to wait for it to clear? And in this situation, then I guess I would look for some clarification on how we would handle this. So let's say it's a routine repair. So in this particular case, I don't know if I'd classify it as an emergency because we knew that the leak existed and we knew that it was necessary for the ice to thaw in order to have the repair done. So at the point in time in the year where that repair could be done, we followed normal procedure, had the company come out and had them do repairs. What happened then is the bill came in, and the bill was more than any of the spending authority that we wouldn't know would be more until the workers actually got here to do the work. I don't know that you could identify those issues that they resolved by just looking at the water tank. So if that's the situation, then it wouldn't really necessarily be considered an emergency. It was a scheduled repair on something that needed repair. What wound up happening is the damage was more extensive than was originally thought, and therefore the cost of repair was more expensive.
So so the way it reads is what Brett is saying is that if it exceeds spending authorities, what I'm reading is that these people need to get kicked in.
Right, that's what triggers an emergency
Yeah.
in my thinking, is that if we know it's over $3,000, we need to make the phone calls.
Any emergency purchases exceeding established city guidelines or authorities must be authorized by,
Right,
you
yeah.
know. So is that?
So Mayor, if the repair was done on June 4th, we had a meeting on June 8th, and nothing was told to council that they discovered this problem and there were extra repairs needed to alert us. And so now, at this meeting, now we're presented with a $6,200 bill.
Yep, so I agree with you, Alderman Minor. What I don't know is when that conversation, or if that conversation occurred, where the extent of the additional damages was a known fact to the staff. So the person that we need to answer that question would be Travis, who is unfortunately not here tonight. Had we have known that there was going to be some questions on this in advance, we would have been able to make sure that he was here to answer it. So for purposes of understanding that in the process, I think it's something that we do need to follow up with, right? What happened? How did this happen? Because I agree with you, Alderman Minor. If the repairs were done, let's say they were done on the 4th and we had a meeting on the 8th, and at the point in time when the repairs were done, we still might not know if it breached that $3,000 threshold. But if there was any reason or cause for whoever was responsible for that work, and in this situation it would be Travis. So if there was cause in his mind to notify us that, you know what, this is a little bit more extensive based on a conversation, then I agree with you. We would have had opportunity at least to hear that at the June 8th meeting. I don't know the full circumstances of what occurred between when they came out and got into the tank and they got out and any communication or whatever happened with Travis. So again, I don't think we have enough information to truly investigate this specific incident and what happened. But to me, it's a situation where we knew that we were going to have to repair it because we knew the leak was there. We followed our typical protocol, and in this particular situation, I don't want to speak for Travis and why Great Plains was chosen, but it does sound like some of that choice may have to do with the warranty on the work that was done. So, that could potentially be why he went that direction. And then, once they got in there, it was a little bit more extensive than anybody had anticipated, so we're not gonna have them crawl out and wait until we get additional estimates from people. We're just gonna have them fix the work, because it's related to water, and we wanna make sure that we continue that supply. So, you know, in the future, that's really, in essence, how it sounds to me based on the facts this occurred. And I understand your question about, you know, if it's considered an emergency, should everybody be contacted? Well, according to what Mr. Peterson just pointed out, in the situation where it will exceed the spending authority, and in this particular situation, we didn't know. So it could have been a judgment call on the Public Works Director's side, I don't know. I would be very happy to investigate this further once we're offline and I have the ability to contact the people who were involved so I can understand how it rolled. But as we move forward for future clarification, the way that we'll be looking at the emergency repairs is if in fact there is a belief, and again, we might not know until they get in there to find out exactly what's wrong, but if there's a belief that it's going to exceed whatever spending authority the staff has, which I believe we started at the beginning of the meeting, and the largest spending authority sits with our city finance officer at $3,000. So that's that part of the case. I think as a council, we should come together and decide how are we going to handle those situations. So, you know, if there is a situation where something is occurring, we call somebody out and they do the repairs, you know, maybe it is an education on the staff perspective to say, you know what, we thought it was going to be this, which has always been under whatever we would normally pay for that, but it looks like it was more extensive. So just as a matter, bring it up to the council so there's an awareness of this going on, and the fact that there is a situation that we handled that's a maintenance situation that was more extensive than we thought it was.
Brett, again, how does Great Plains repair these? Do they get inside of the tank or the outside?
No, they've got,
So they're on the outside of the tank?
there's a lift.
right?
They brought in a big, huge lift.
Okay. You know, whenever they found out, when Travis found out there was more than the two that he was thinking of, there should have been an estimate given right then. They were not inside the tank like you keep saying there.
Well, I wasn't there, okay, when this whole incident occurred, nor were you. So I've been told that
No,
there were
I'm
divers
just
involved.
listening, I'm listening to what Brett says that they're repaired.
And I was
And
told
if
that there were
if they're
divers
repaired
involved
from
in the beginning.
Outside, you know
Okay,
what?
so regardless
you know,
of how the issue was
there
determined
should have been
or
an
found
estimate
out,
given.
fine.
Okay, what I'm reading with Bill's concern is the genesis of communication and the lack of. So I think this was handled per the policy in terms of, you know, you thought it was an emergency, you were under your spending limit, and it went over. But we had a meeting subsequent that we weren't informed about it. I think therein lies the real issue, and that is the communication that you're spending monies that the council should know, should be updated, and might be just an oversight, no big deal. But for me, that's what I'm getting out of this, that communication should be brought forward to the council when you're spending monies. Whether you have the spending limit or not, you could say, hey, oh, you know, in your report out, did you report it out last meeting?
I don't remember.
I don't
No,
know
but
either. I don't.
Travis possibly could have had it in his report, and he wasn't here because he was dealing with the.
But,
had another
but you know
critical-
there's money being spent in this deal, and so for me, that's what I'm getting out of this, that you as a staff communicate to this board that, hey, you know, we're fixing the water tower and we sent that, you know, blah, blah, blah. I think, you know, from this deal here, there's two triggers here for the money being spent. And I don't see a problem with it yet, you know, in terms of what was done. But there's definitely could be some better communication.
Sure.
Especially when there's funds being spent,
Right.
whether you know it's 500 or, you know, 15,000. I think if I'm reading into what Bill's concern is, it's probably has a lot to do with communication. I don't know.
Alderman Minor, anything else you'd like to add?
I have no problem with getting the tower fixed, with, you know, using a different vendor. All of that is fine. My problem comes up with, we're not getting an estimate or not getting a contract. We don't know what we're gonna be charged for something. How can a city operate like that? Do you have somebody come to your home and just tell them, I want this done, and you have no idea what it's gonna cost? You wouldn't do that. And so I'm just very frustrated that the city administrator points out that he is well aware of the emergency purchasing provisions because he used them last year at Allen Gulch project. And yet somehow this is just overlooked. I'm not blaming anybody. I don't think anybody intentionally did this. Public Works Director Kepner would only have $1,000 spending approval. I don't think that he's just going out and doing things without somebody in the office knowing about it. And why he wasn't informed by either the city administrator or the city finance officer of the procedures that are required, that's what's concerning to me.
Okay, any other discussion?
Well, do you feel like this fell under your spending authority?
So at the time that we proceeded with the tank repair, it was not deemed an emergency as it relates to exceeding the $3,000 spending limit.
Which is your spending?
There was an urgency, yeah, which is Stacia's spending authority is 3,000, I'm 2,000, Travis is 1,000. We knew there was an urgency to get this tank online before the busy summer season hits because we need it. The reason why we couldn't fix it sooner was because we still had ice in the tank, and there wasn't an effective way to fix it earlier. So we needed it fixed. Again, if we need to paint something, we paint it. If we need to fix something, we fix it. Now again, I'm looking at an emergency purchase as being the threshold is the $3,000. It's not giving it an emergency status. It's does it exceed $3,000? If that question is yes, then we enact that section of the code. I'm the one who drafted that section of the code. I'm the one who brought it to council probably about 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, to have it adopted so that we had some accountability. I have no problem following that, but when Travis and I had originally discussed it, it didn't sound like it was gonna exceed our level of cost. We communicate with Stacia all the time about spending, what's in the budget, what's available. So, yeah, I agree, there should have been mention of the tank being repaired at that next meeting, that, hey, we had the guy on the lift and he redid it. I was originally told it was like 8 to 10 leaks, and then now in the letter, it's identified 14. I agree about the communication piece. I completely agree with that. But it's an evolution of something of saying, that we can't really get a price quote on it in the sense that if they're here, they're already geared up to fix it right on the spot. Quite frankly, with Midco, we haven't been all that pleased with their results because we just had the tank repaired last year.
Can I get into my side notes? The heater and the mixer, is that going in this summer?
The heater and the mixer are already in that big blue tank. The reason why we still had ice in the tank is because there was a ground fault, something with the electrical wiring, which wouldn't allow it to operate correctly. So we couldn't utilize it. And then by the time that was put in, ice was already forming. They couldn't pull it out to fix it and repair it and get it back in. And so they're still working on it, and Travis is calling them every week to try to get them to finish it up.
So it's not repaired yet?
So it's not repaired yet, it's not
But
completely
intended to
functioning.
before it frees up?
Yeah.
And then that tower's 200 feet tall, right?
It's 121.
Oh,
122.
I had in my head, because when you were talking, okay, then that makes sense.
Yeah,
The
we
112, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
in the summertime, we keep the water, we have been keeping it, well, and sometimes it's like at 112, sometimes we've had it up to 115, 16. We've had it, one summer, I think we had it all the way up to 119. We usually drop it down a little bit in the wintertime just because of that ice issue of buildup. We just want to make sure it's not way at the top. And so, you know, we can change that level of the tank from the digital touchscreen.
But going forward, we shouldn't have this ice damage, hopefully, right?
Correct.
If that
Yeah,
thing's working.
yeah, once the heater and the mixing unit are there, it's just heating the water warm enough so that it doesn't freeze over. So you're not gonna get hot water.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion if there is one.
So moved.
Motion, Alderman Peterson to pay the invoice for Great Plains for the $6,200. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second, Alderman Johnson. Roll call vote, please, Stacia.
Bill Minor,
Yes.
John Johnson, Steve Jarvis,
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yep.
Motion carried. Action item 7A, approval of 2020-2021 retail on-off sale malt beverage in South Dakota Farms wine renewals, 158 Museum Drive, Mangiamo Pizzeria LLC.
This actually is a new license, and it's for the property that took over for Slate Creek. All the paperwork's filled out, the taxes have been paid, the backgrounds came back great. I recommend for approval.
Any discussion?
So the next two items are relating to them, right?
Yes, it
One's
is.
for
One's
malt
for malt
beverage.
beverage, one's for wine.
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
We have Alderman Peterson with a motion, Alderman Jarvis second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
John Johnson.
Yes.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yep.
Bill Minor.
Yes.
Action item 7B, approval of 2020 retail wine and cider license, 158 Museum Drive, Mangiamo Pizzeria LLC. Any discussion?
So moved.
Motion, Alderman Peterson.
Second.
Second, Alderman Jarvis. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yep.
Bill Minor.
Yes.
John Johnson.
Action item 7C, approval of 2020-2021 retail on-off sale malt beverage in South Dakota farm wine license retail, 237 Elm Street, Taqueria Las Camelinas.
This is another new malt beverage license. The background check came fine. All of the paperwork is filled out. Stephanie is here if you have any questions for her.
Your recommendation?
Is for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Alderman Peterson, recommendation for approval, seconded by Alderman Jarvis. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Jim Peterson.
Yep.
Bill Minor.
Yes.
John Johnson. Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Motion carries. Action item 7D, charitable lottery, Hill City Senior Center quilt raffle.
So in your packet is the raffle permit request. It is to begin July 1st to begin, and then the drawing to occur on August 15th. And it's with the Hill City Senior Center. I know there was some confusion with the form that was in the digital packet. That's been redone so the dates make sense. So,
Okay.
Mr. Householder is here if there's any questions on that raffle, but recommend approval.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion, Alderman Johnson, is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Jarvis, any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
John Johnson. Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yep.
Bill Minor.
Yes.
Approved action item 7E, approval of sound permit for 125 Main Street, Harney Peak Inn, Dan McNamara.
So outdoor sound permits, you can see kind of the guidelines that are on the application. These are actually issued for periods of 1 year or less. So this permit is going to be valid until March 31st of next year. In the description, they're just talking about having a 4th of July celebration with a 3-piece jazz band. But this license would be valid for the remainder of this year, like I said, through March 31st of next year. And so I would recommend approval.
Why is the date March 31st? I'm sorry.
That's just, if I remember correctly, it's in the code.
That's
whatever.
just the kind of the cycle date, if you will.
Yeah, it's in the municipal code that all the sound permits run on that.
They rotate out,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know the rhyme and reason of why. but,
I was just curious, yeah.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion Alderman Jarvis, is there a second?
Second.
Second Alderman Johnson, any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Steve Jarvis,
Yes.
Jim Peterson,
Yep.
Bill Miner,
Yes.
John Johnson.
All in favor, motion carried. Action item 7F, approval of Raleigh Main Street closure.
So, you probably have all heard that Sturgis is gonna proceed with their rally, a modified rally this year, so it's the 80th. So they're canceling a lot of the structured events that would create a gathering of a crowd and whatnot. And they're putting up hand sanitizing stations and whatnot to do their event. So, but the event is going on, and I think everybody kind of agrees that I've talked to that said even if they had canceled the event, the bikers are still coming. So with that being said, I think it would be prudent for Hill City to do our road closure again. We have already talked about that we need to modify our road closure a little bit inherently because of the mid-block crosswalk on Main Street. So we'll make accommodations so that that is kept clear for the rally. So with barricades and signage and whatnot, so we need to work on that. But we wanted to have this discussion tonight so it allows us to talk about any other changes that we might want to do to the rally closure so that we get the appropriate signage if we're going to change something. So I think the regular rally closure makes sense to keep doing it. There has been some discussion about the straddling the center line on Main Street and whether that's still a good idea to allow bikes to straddle that center line. I think you could still do the motorcycle only closure on Main Street, maybe not do the center line part of it, and then the bikes would park further down in front of the school and down to, Oak Street, and further on down. So if there's only one other modification between the mid-block crosswalk, I think it's worth a discussion about the center line parking. One thing that with the center line parking that's always kind of hit and miss is if you've got your center line here, the idea is that they straddle it with your wheels. So you got one wheel on this side, one on this side. If you get one bike that parks here, all the other bikes fall in line and park the same way, and then they'll do it on the other side, and then your drive lane shrinks down quite a bit. So it may be worth it to not have that center line parking this year, just as something to think about. I think, I know we have enough bike parking on Main Street to accommodate all of the bikes if we don't have center line parking. And I think we might get some more business pushed further south within that area. So, so my recommendation is we discuss that center line parking, that we definitely have a closure again this year, make that accommodation for the mid-block pedestrian crossing, and move forward. So.
Okay, so before I open it up to the council for discussion, I just do want to make mention of some information that Alderman Miner had sent, which should be included in your packets. And Alderman Miner, did you want to go ahead and explain the information that you provided?
So the weekend before the rally last year, I started at Poplar Street and did traffic counts down to where the closures started on the north end by the Exxon. There's a total of 101 parking spots in that area, not including handicapped. But obviously the new bump outs have changed that slightly. And you can see how many spots were occupied, how many spots were open. If there was one bike in a parking spot meant for a car, I counted it as occupied, even though probably 4, 5, 6 bikes could park there. And so you can see, leading up to the street being closed on Friday morning, that at 7 o'clock at night, the lowest percentage we had was 74% of the parking spaces all the way up, to the school. The entrance for the high school were filled. So then we closed Main Street, and on Friday you can see our percentages drop into the 40s and 50s. So by midweek, that following Friday of rally, it's down to 39%. And then Saturday and Sunday, the final days of the rally last year, we had some bad weather with rain and thunderstorms. The mayor authorized the street to be opened back up on Sunday, and even though we had storms and bad weather, you can see the numbers jumped up to 57% of the spots were open or occupied. So if we're going to close Main Street, I don't think we should do it for 2 weekends. The traffic counts certainly don't bear it out. We have no problem the weekend before rally with cars and bikes parking successfully alongside one another. I'm not aware of any accidents. We could check with the sheriff's office, but I keep hearing about the turnover Wednesday and the second crowds coming, but I don't see it in the data. And so if we're going to close it, I'd say only make it through the following Thursday at the most for a week, and then open it back up. And as far as being able to barricade and tell bikers not to park places, we historically have not had very good luck. We couldn't get them to not park in front of the hydrant by Mangy Moose. We couldn't get them to not park and block the driveway into the diner, despite putting barrels there. So unless you're going to physically put a whole row of barrels or something there, you're going to be unsuccessful in trying to direct them not to centerline park.
So, are you done, Bill?
Yes.
So did you take into account that one parking spot would hold 4 bikes? So
I
even,
actually have how many bikes were on the street. So yeah, I can tell you the total number of bikes.
so we're
But,
talking about
yeah.
a parking spot that typically would hold a car, but in this event could potentially have 4 bikes parked in there. At least that's what I've seen. So potentially that's 8 people
Right.
or 4 people, 4 to 8 people versus a car. I'm just wondering if you accounted for that. 'Cause
I
it
only
might-
looked if there was something in the parking spot. I didn't, people show up in a slingshot and trikes and different things. So I can tell you how many bikes were on Main Street and each night. I can tell you how many were there on some days. I think, like I said, I had a total of 480 one day at 2 in the afternoon. So I'm just merely looking at the parking spots, you know. How many people come in a family with 2 kids and show up in the car?
Well, that is,
So,
the discretionary income is what you're after here, and what they're spending, and how many people can you get in there, so, I get that, down in the south end, it doesn't fill in because, unless it's full, but I don't know how you can, there's no real easy way to open that up. I don't think, you'd have to open it all the way to, it'd be tough.
It's tough, it would be tough to direct everybody on Main Street and then last minute tell them, okay, this is as far as you can go with your car.
Yeah,
And now we've gotta kick you back to the Railroad Avenue. I mean, it's cumbersome. It's hard to communicate that we've got open spaces down there. I think,
but we've also created density down in the mid part,
right.
you know.
You know, for years, I know there's been concerns of like Desperados and the diner and that area of not getting
Mm-hmm.
all the bike traffic down their neck of the woods, so to speak. You know, I agree with these numbers as far as, you know, the spaces that are occupied before the rally, because everybody's spread out and they can't centerline park and whatnot, and it's bikes and cars. Yeah, you've got, you know, on that Saturday, the 27th, there's 2 open spots. You've got 98% occupancy. And then later on, you know, you got high occupants throughout. And then once the rally happens, your percent occupied drops down significantly. And then once it reopens again, it's trying to rebound to, you know, 57%. You know,
Bill,
I know the safety concern has been, you know, how bikes interface with cars and vice versa has been a big concern. But, you know, there's, you know, before the rally week and after rally week, there's still bikes and there's still cars and they're transitioning pretty well.
Bill, how did you count for centerline parking, because there are no parking spots in the center line, and then when the bikes arrive, there's all these bikes down center line.
I didn't account for any centerline parking, but take Friday, the 9th, when I said there were 62 open spots. There were 184 bikes parked on Main Street from the school down, including those parked in the center line. So I can tell you how many bikes were there. There were also 3 cars that were parked up by the school. So,
No, I think it's a good dialogue, Bill. I think it's good. I mean, we gotta look at the whole thing too.
So Alderman Minor, can I ask you a question?
sure.
Okay, so when you prefaced this and you started to explain the information and the data that you had here, you had started with not necessarily commenting on closing or not closing or center lane parking, but I seemed to think that I was hearing from you that you're asking that the actual dates that the street are closed be taken into consideration. So, you know, it may be closed, but do we need to have it closed for both full weekends? Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Okay.
I think by the second weekend, the traffic counts go back and would be just like the weekend before the rally, which cars and bikes get along just fine then.
Okay, thank you. So maybe if we could start and maybe piece this up so we know what direction we're working toward. Let's just take the first question, should the street be opened or not? So is there right now consensus among the council that the street should be opened, and then if so, we can take it from there as to what the configuration would look like? And then
Closed, you
what
mean?
the dates, yeah, right,
Closed-
so would we
closed,
have
you
it
mean?
closed to, right,
Yeah.
so would it be closed for motorcycle traffic only? And then once we understand that, then we can talk about configuration, and then we can talk about the time frame that this is done. So, any comments from council relative to should the street be closed for motorcycles only? Are you all in consensus, or do you have differing opinions? Why don't we just kind of have you go around the table and let us know your thoughts. So Johnny, we'll start with you.
Always has, it's
Okay,
fine with me.
okay. Alderman Peterson?
Well, when it started, and there was a committee that started that, it was really about safety.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think it, can it evolve? Sure.
Okay, Alderman Jarvis, your thoughts?
I think the safety part of it, we have to really take a look at.
Okay. Alderman Minor?
Yeah, I'm fine with closing it, but just not for 10 days.
Okay. Okay, so the council is in consensus that the street will be closed and limited to motorcycle traffic only. So now let's talk about the configuration of it.
Start with center line if you would.
Okay, right, so that's what I mean by configuration. So center line, what is the council's thoughts on typical parking like we always have with no center line parking?
With what?
With no center line?
Well, I don't know. You're gonna have to, like Bill said, they're gonna park there because the habit's there, so you're gonna have to do something to stop them from doing that.
Okay.
So is that running barrels down the middle? I don't know what that is, but obviously there'd be some type of solution.
Well, I think if you just can't run just one.
Or barricades or whatever.
One barrel down through there, you're gonna have to do some kind of barrels over here and here, then have it blocked off.
So what we have is, if you were on Main Street during the sidewalk construction, those bicycle rack looking things, those are owned by the city, we own those. We have, I believe, enough to put on Main Street. We might have enough, depending on how we put it through, we could put like a few of them and then some barrels and then some signage on those racks as well, center line parking. And we could extend that throughout the closure. We could figure out, it's a measurement, just take a measurement of the closure and work it out. There may be the need to purchase more of those racks. I know we have some barrels, and we can always rent barrels too if there's some available. So there is a way to put it together so that it would work. The one nice benefit that I see is, I consistently hear that those businesses down further south don't get many people parking in front of them. And that if there's no center line parking, I think the traffic would end up parking a little bit further down, and they're still gonna walk the full length of our Main Street. So the other problem that everybody knows about, if you get one bike parked incorrectly, then they're apt to follow. That block in front of the diner has been notorious for parking incorrectly. So that to me is a huge safety component. So if they're doing it wrong, we've got a bigger problem.
If you're gonna do it, then have it there like we have, then you could tape it, so it shows them they park in here, a temporary tape down, to help guide them. We used to set up bikes
Right.
and leave them there so that people that worked, and I don't know if that's being done anymore, but
No.
it
Yeah.
does
Kinda
become a problem when
Kind
they.
of plant the bikes there.
Yeah,
So Alderman, can I open it up to the audience? Would you like to hear from?
sure.
Okay, so
I'd love
if
to.
anyone has any comments, please come up to the front and tell us your name.
Leroy Barker. My thinking is, if I'm on a motorcycle and there's no parking, I'm gonna head out of here and I'm gonna go to Custer. It's just gonna eliminate parking. If I wanna stop at Meiji Moose or Buff and Buffalo, and I gotta park all the way past the school because everything's taken, I don't think that you need to close that center line. It has not created any problems in the past. I think it's done a good job so far. I know there's the kick out for the crosswalk needs to be blocked off. I understand that, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So, in light of that, you could do just Central Business District center line.
Yep.
And then the end is not, there could be a hybrid to that.
Correct. Yep. You bet.
You're next, and then,
Rick Alexander, having been on the committee, Jim remembers or John remembers, half a dozen years, 20 years ago, We had that committee and discussed it. Safety was a overriding thing to begin with. Once you have it, you know, the idea that you wanna separate the bikes from the motorcycle, or the cars from the motorcycles. If you're gonna have motorcycles, then the intent was to increase the density, to get as much business out of the X number of bikes parked there as possible, hence became the center line. I don't think there's been a huge problem in the center line. I've driven up and down there with emergency vehicles for dozens of times over the last 25, 30 years, whatever we've been doing it. We didn't have it on for some years, but the years that we have done it, it's worked okay. There's nobody down there. But that was just to increase the density of the business, what was there. The idea we've learned over the time, and this was years ago, is that just be like kind of what Leroy was leaning towards, if you have this bikes in the center, or if you don't, doesn't really have anything to do with how they park at the other end. Because most of them seem to want to be within, everybody's different, but they want to be within an arm's length, or they want to be within seeing distance, or whatever of their bike. So just because you have a whole bunch of parking down by the Conoco, doesn't mean they're gonna park bikes down there. Just because there's a whole bunch of parking down by the Hilio, they're not gonna park bikes there. Just because there's a whole bunch of parking down by the real estate office down there, they're not gonna park more bikes there. Because they wanna be within, it's not like parking a car and beeping and walking away from it, they wanna be close to their bike. It's not a matter of the distance that they're walking, it's a matter of being able to see their possessions. So keep those things in mind. I don't think it's gonna, you're just gonna reduce the total numbers of people if you get rid of the middle parking. You know, as far as running it from the beginning to the end, whether it's 10 days or 12 days or however, the cars will mix with the motorcycles. It might not be as safe, but they will mix. We've kind of went with the, you know, the rallies kind of increased this last few years to that 10 days, but whenever you turn it off, if you never did ever do it, you know what? It's gonna fill up with bikes anyway. You know why I know that? Because mom, dad, 2.3 kids aren't there anyway. So there's nobody in cars. There's nobody in cars that if you had it completely open and there was no bikes there, mom and dad and 2.3 kids, you know why? Because they don't have any motel rooms. You know why? Because it's all filled up with people that drive motorcycles or pull trailers and then drive their motorcycle. So the idea is that we can have these discussions every single year, but just to remind everybody of those 5 or 6 points that we've learned years ago, and now all of a sudden after everything seems to be working all right for 6, 8, 10, except for the sidewalk deal in the middle, and it seems like you just be able to end it and start it again. It did it at every intersection, it ends and it starts again. It's not really anything different. Treat that middle bump out as another intersection. It's gonna end the row and it's gonna start again. I don't really see the need for a whole bunch more discussion, but whatever you think.
Lorena Fries with the Farmer's Daughter. I respect Mr. Minor's work in determining how many parking spots were available. Last year was the 79th, this year is the 80th. And so I think it's a mistake to reduce our parking available for the bikers on a 5-year anniversary kind of a thing, because it will be a bigger crowd this year. And so I am actually in favor of keeping centerline parking just to get as many people here as we can. The rally is not my biggest week of the year, but I have friends whose businesses make their summer during the rally. And so I strongly encourage you to keep the center line and close the street to everything but bikes. And I know that there's some talk about, well, open it up for both bikes and cars. The very first year I owned Farmer's Daughter, we ended up opening like on a Saturday, and there were 5 cars parked in front of the Farmer's Daughter, and a pickup came and backed up and knocked them all over. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment? Okay, I'll turn it back to the council. Any further discussion?
So I think you can do a better job of controlling that center line by parking, by striping it. You know, if there's a way to do that, and I think there's something that, or, you know, I mean, because I know in front of Desperados, you see it starting to veer off. And that's because nobody's helping, guiding, or whatever. anyway.
Okay,
So I think there's things that you could do to improve that.
okay, so if we could just then get everybody's input, so we have a consensus on the configuration by way of center line.
Even if it veers off, as long as emergency vehicles would be get down there, I would think, who in the hell cares where they park?
Okay.
You know,
Okay, so Alderman Jarvis, you wanna start with your thoughts on this configuration as far as center line or no center line?
You know, we can have center line parking.
Okay.
It gives us more parking in that condensed area, like Vic was saying.
Okay, Alderman Peterson,
I'm fine with leaving it as is.
center line, okay, Alderman
it's like
Jones,
Railroad Avenue, geez, you're not even supposed to park over there. One park says there, and right away there's 50 there, so
Mhm.
what's the difference?
Okay, so you're in favor of center line,
Fine.
okay, and Alderman Minor,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with center line, but we've learned that trying to block the turn at the diner doesn't work. You have to physically block the entire space that you don't want them to park in center line.
okay. Okay, so then the last, if there's no other discussion on any type of configuration or anything like that, then we'll move on to that. Would you like to hear from the audience again,
Yeah,
Council?
but you know, the diner, in the past, we'd put the barrels up and we've gone out and taped it and kept it open
Okay.
and so that they could turn in there, but.
We've got another comment, please.
Vic Alexander, those little fence deals, those little livestock panels, but they're like for baby livestock or something.
Bicycle
But those
racks.
little, those.
Bicycle racks, we call them.
Okay, whatever, but we haven't really had those to use a lot before. And if those were identified as centering the bike, you know, there must be, how long are they, 8 foot long, 10 foot long? But if that's what they were, and you use those to identify where the bike parks, and then keep it one every so often, 10 or 12 of them, the full length of the street, and that's where the bikes line up with those, you've solved a lot of your problem. And then when you do the same thing down there by the diner, turn them the other way, and have that area blocked off, so that they don't park in that area. You know, cause you park it in, leave them in the center where you keep the center open. Yeah, I think you could utilize those things and do it, you know, do like Jim said, identify them a little bit better. Keep in mind that over the years, we tried to keep the expense down too, but if you have those things, we could use them.
Mhm.
It wasn't worth buying that type of stuff. We could buy 4 or 5 Harleys, and if you parked them out there, the first 2 or 3, they'd park right where they're at. If the city just owned 4 or 5 Harleys and stick them out there, that would,
Good idea,
Do the
let's
same.
make a motion for that.
Okay, so,
see if it's an emergency.
so the last part that I'd asked the council to have discussion on before, any type of motion is formulated to include all of this, would be the timing or the dates that are intended to be utilized for closing the street to motorcycle traffic only.
Well, it's the ending date that has always been kind of an accordion, and we can change that based on need, but. Okay, that's been done in the past, right?
Yep. So the closure would start the Friday before the official start date.
Is that the second?
It's, this year, no, this year it's later.
Rally dates are from the 7th to the 16th,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
so it starts on that Friday is the 7th. And then the 16th is not that next Sunday, but the following Sunday.
You're right.
So it's a 10-day deal.
And typically how we've historically done it is we've closed them from the 7th. So if we used prior, we would close it from the 7th to the 16th with the exception of last year when it was opened on the 16th instead of being closed on that Sunday. So if we frame it after what occurred last year, it would be the 7th through the 15th. That would be our normal. And that would incorporate Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then another Friday and Saturday. So I'd ask the council to have some discussion on, I'm assuming the begin date is acceptable, it's the end date, and when should the street be reopened to combined traffic?
been opened up when it thins out at the end
Yeah.
anyhow?
I think
Yeah, I don't know if we should start, have a firm date, because if there's gonna be more here this year than typically there are, we might need to extend that just a little bit longer.
So I just think staff can work with the mayor and the council and come up and say, hey, this is what it's looking like, and, you know, just leave it as an accordion deal, and maybe it goes longer, maybe it goes shorter.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, then if everybody's go ahead, Alderman Minor.
So what criteria would you suggest then, if half the parking spots are open, we take down the closure? I mean, it's all subjective at that point.
It is. I just think it's always been where you've kind of measured it and said, hey, it's pretty thin, and let's open it up. I mean, isn't that?
So on the front end of the closure, you know, we look at that Wednesday, that Thursday. Sometimes we haven't done the closure until Saturday, where Friday was wide open. And it was a judgment call on our looking at what's going on. They're not coming, it's pretty quiet. And then we just say, we're gonna hold off a day on Saturday because, you know, you got these high numbers here where there's 68 to 98% of these parking spaces are still full. You've got a nice mix of cars, and it's not just bike. I mean, we know that the cars are there early in the morning, and then they transition out, and then the bikes come and then take over anyway. And so we've delayed it. I know we've either started it on Friday or Saturday. We've never held off till Sunday. So we know that part of it. And then on the back end, we've opened it as early as a Saturday. One year it was as early as a Saturday morning we opened it, and then last year we opened it Sunday morning. Pretty rarely do we hold it through all the way to Monday. And again, that's just a gut feeling. That's a communication with the Public Works Director, myself, Mayor, to kind of figure out where everybody's at. And, you know,
Getting
there's
a sense
usually
if they're moving
there's
out of
usually a
it.
sense from the business community too of saying, gosh, you know, nothing's going on, so.
Go ahead and recognize someone.
Mayor?
Hang on a second, Bill, we've got somebody from the audience speaking, and then you'll have the floor.
Lorraine Freese again with the Farmer's Daughter. I mean, you can walk down Main Street as shop owners. We're there all day long and we see what the traffic looks like. And so if you have somebody walking the street on Thursday saying, geez, should we keep it closed another day? What's your opinion? I'm pretty sure the shop owners will tell you what their gut is. I mean, it's not rocket science.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, thank you. All right, Alderman Minor?
In 2017, the former Public Works Director opened the street early. What date was that he opened it? It was well before Friday or Saturday, wasn't it?
It was a Wednesday.
Yeah, and I remember there was an uproar, and he said, yeah, there was no traffic. So we've opened it as early as Wednesday. So
I don't know. I don't see how we can predict that right now.
Okay. Okay,
It's never gonna be perfect,
No.
no matter which way you do it.
any other discussion from the council?
I think it's the business owners we need to listen to.
Okay, is someone prepared to make a motion?
Make a motion to approval of Raleigh Main Street closure, to do the closure as normal with the improvements of the center, you know, that center, what we, you know, you gotta deal with, and try to come up with a plan to have center line parking more delineated.
And also the bump out, we need to do something about that.
Yeah, that bump out, I mean, they gotta deal with that, I mean, that's, you gotta, but that is easy to deal with, and then delineate that center line parking, and you guys use your, you know, judgment, I guess. See
Okay,
how it's going.
is there a second to the motion?
Second.
So motion Alderman Peterson, second Alderman Jarvis. Any additional discussion? Roll call vote, please, Stacia.
Jim Peterson,
Yep.
Bill Miner,
No.
John Johnson,
Yes.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
3-1, motion carried. Action item 7G, 2020 budget update for COVID-19. Stacia.
Okay, in your packet, there's several sheets. I went through and updated them through June. The general fund, as you can see with our property taxes, we're actually down 7.82% from 2019. Our sales tax, we're down 4.52%. Total revenue, to date, we're down 7.32%. I did get our final payment for the first portion of June for our tax payment. It was for $17,335.41. I do not have the distribution letter stating how much of that is triple B money or gross receipts tax, or how much is actually sales tax. But if you take that with our total sales tax and total triple B amount, it actually, and you add those together and then look at how much we had in those two totals for 2019, we're actually ahead by 4%. Okay. Then on to triple B, we're actually up 5.1% for our triple B compared to last year at this time. Of course, our bid tax, we're down 58%, which we all understand that portion with our hotels and that. Regarding our water, we are actually down for total revenue with water at 9.61%. And our sewer, we are down for total revenue of 10.69% from last year. Anyone have any questions?
Do we have any upcoming projects we need to look at as far as maybe holding off on?
Any projects that we have that?
Yep.
The only one that I think that we have is still that's on the table is just the bid project.
So we've sort of eliminated all non-essential stuff at this point.
As much as we can, we're only doing just what we need for operations to maintain.
I still think we're gonna get hit in terms of, so I think we still should take a very conservative approach.
Really be cautious.
Huh? I mean, you're just seeing it in water and sewer, and then you got a bid that's $2 a head in beds, right? Isn't that how that, $2 a room night deal?
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're showing sales tax push or about par.
About, I mean,
And,
yeah.
and these months that we're looking at are not critical, I mean, not big months.
No, we're not.
So the big months are coming, and they're already down in bid, I mean, that, I don't know. I still think we need to take a pretty conservative look. And then with regards to the bid, what project, is it the alley part project that's still thinking?
The alley and the senior addition with the restrooms. That was put off for 60 days at your last meeting, so it won't be revisited till July.
Okay, so with respect to that, you know, the city was gonna front that money, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that needs to be relooked at and have them go out and look at a bonding issue versus having the city go into their reserves and front it. I think that needs another look. Cause money's cheap and you can get, you know, versus taking reserves and doing that. Doesn't stop the bidding process, it doesn't, you know, would it cost the bid a little bit more? Sure, but it is, I don't know if it's that significant, and I'd rather have the reserves sitting there.
With the water and sewer, I know that a lot of that has to do with the school. 2.5 months of not actually being in school, using any water there. And also where our hotels, it took them a while before they started back up, which is where our deficiency is in our water and sewer revenue is.
Yeah, my thing is still stay conservative.
Okay. Any other council discussion? Okay, while this was put as an action item, there really is no action that is being sought of the council relative to any motion necessary. So with no further discussion on that, we'll go ahead to move on down our agenda, and that puts us into report items. So Common Council, Alderman Minor.
I'd just like to follow up on the discussion from earlier. I've asked prior if the city got certificates of insurance, had contracts with vendors or contractors that we use. I just think we need to tighten up our practices and have contracts, estimates. It's not a huge deal if you don't know what the total cost is going to be. I literally did hundreds of contracts with state government while in business. There were time and materials contracts with cost not to exceed. It's very simple to outline cost for equipment, cost for labor. And then if you have 2 holes you're patching on a water tower or 14, it doesn't matter because you have all the components identified. And so we need to get our practices in line with the rest of the world. So I would like to see a full report at the next meeting, because I don't want to hear again, here's a $5,000 or $10,000 bill and we only thought it was going to cost $3,000. I won't vote to pay for it. So let's get our business practices in line with what a governmental entity should be doing.
Okay, anything else, Alderman Minor?
No.
Alderman Jarvis?
Nothing.
Alderman Peterson?
Thanks, Bill, for your input on that. I think you're absolutely right. And somehow we need to follow up on that. Also, thanks for your, at least setting a baseline on this rally closure thing, and we can monitor it again this year and see how it's going and figure out how we can keep improving it. So, thanks for taking the effort of doing that.
Anything else, Alderman Peterson?
No.
Alderman Johnson?
Last Tuesday night was the ambulance meeting. To date, they've had 112 calls. Decided not to do the t-shirt sale this year to avoid the contact. Some discussion on the big firecracker going off on Mount Rushmore and what Hill City's ambulance role is in it. So that's about it.
Okay, I'll move on to myself. So we're continuing to watch daily the numbers that we have for COVID cases, both in Pennington County and Custer. I will be posting an update a little bit later this week to the Facebook page so everyone can see. Right now, Custer actually has risen in case count. So over the past week, they've gone from 2 cases to 7 cases. 6 of those are active and 1 is recovered. So at this point, again, it's just a situation where we're monitoring it. There's no expectation that we have of taking any additional action from a city perspective. One of the things that I did want to make sure that the council was aware of is today the governor had a teleconference, and during that teleconference she talked about the funding that has been allocated to the state of South Dakota and then how that would break down to each one of our individual cities. We were sent some additional documentation that I would be more than happy to forward this afternoon. We got it, if anybody wants to see it. From an allocation perspective, Hill City would be given $233,310. There are some very specific things that money can be spent on, and as of now, it still cannot be spent on any revenue shortfalls. So it would need to be things like supplies that are related to COVID, anything that the city needs to undertake that's specific to COVID itself. So there's a list of those items as well. What Stacia, myself, and Brett are gonna be doing is sitting down and taking a look at what those specific things are, and then if there are expenses that we have had to incur that are related to that, that would be recoverable out of those funds, that maximum amount of funds that's been earmarked for Hill City. So I will provide the council with more information when we have it. The expenditure of the funds is, I believe, from March, sometime in March, maybe March 6th through the end of the year. So this would include anything in the event that we have an uptick and we have to buy additional supplies or whatever we as a city feel that we need to do in order to support that, that would fit under the spending guidelines that have come down from the governor. So again, we will have those conversations when things are identified.
Are those like grant monies or, I mean, it's not a loan or anything like that, right?
No, it's like a reimbursement. It's a reimbursement. Okay, 2 weeks ago, Brett and I had the opportunity to sit down with Chief Welchel and Sergeant Harkins and discuss a lot of things. It was a very good conversation that we had, and we had committed to each other that we will be doing this on a regular basis, so I believe we're gonna start out monthly. During our conversation, there were several topics that we discussed. The one specifically that we talked about was our police coverage and the deputy coverage that we normally have during the rally. So because of all the changes and we know everything that's going on, will our coverage be impacted or affected in any way? We have been assured that we will still maintain the same footprint, so it will be the same amount of deputies that we typically have that come to Hill City. The difference is that there may have been some faces that we saw year after year. Usually what they will do is they will allow deputies from other states to post to do rally coverage. However, this year, because of everything that's going on with COVID and the riots that we have, they are not allowing any of that to occur. So we will be seeing coverage, but it could potentially be cadets, it could be deputies from other parts of the county. So we are gonna have the coverage, it's just probably gonna be faces that we haven't seen before. The fence at the tennis court between where the Boys and Girls Club rent and where the senior center is located. So there are going to be some activities that are going to be occurring as it relates to our summer and things moving. I know that the Lions Club is planning on partnering with the senior center for breakfast. They're going to specifically do that in July for the 3rd and 4th, and then see if they can move that into the Sturgis Rally as well. With a lot of the changes that we've had related to COVID, a lot of places, including our organizations, have had to make changes as well. So when you see the breakfast at the senior center, expect that there be no seating inside of the facility. In order to maintain the safety for the volunteers, serving will be done. With that being said, the need to have additional real estate for seating is pretty important, and we know here that we're kind of in the middle of a plans relative to changing those tennis courts and it becoming more parking lots. So we did receive a request to see if it would be possible to have the fence taken down and the net for the tennis court, so they can put up seating and whatever else there, and then it can be used that way. So there are plans to do that. I wanted to make sure that the council was aware of it in case you start to get phone calls or anything like that. The last note that I have that I'd like to talk about is at our next meeting. So our next meeting is going to be on July 13th. And at that meeting, we do plan on having refreshments at 5 o'clock. So I would like to extend the invitation to the council to come early, and anyone else of the public to join us for refreshments and probably cake. Okay, that's all I had, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brett.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, we had some dialogue with Rural Development and Kale, our city engineer, about the water reservoir project. There were some questions related to the alignment of the road that goes up to the proposed tank location and the piping that comes out. And so there was some questions about the alignment of it and part of the pipe being underneath the road. So in response to that, Kale already had his survey crew come up, reshoot the elevations, and adjust that plan And so that's already been back to rural development. There was also a repositioning of the tank so that it would be easier to have a platform or a way for the company to construct it. So they're working on that, but his survey crew was out last week, shot all the elevations. That work's already been accomplished. So that's going back to rural development either today or tomorrow. While Kale's crew is here, they're also working on that road assessment that we talked about. So that was also done last week, and we're gonna get that report in July. The deadline for that is like July 10th. The Major Lake Bridge project, at our last meeting, we discussed that archaeological and environmental report that had to be done through the Forest Service to address their concerns. That's been forwarded to the DOT, so it currently is on their desk in order to process it through their channels. I'm in communication with them at least once a week to make sure that that project is going forth the way it needed to. These environmental and archaeological ones are always notorious for taking up time and energy, so we'll see a lot more movement in the coming months. So, I think the goal is to still have that out to bid this fall and award the contract and proceed with that grant money, that 80-20 grant money. So, and then as far as the bid board projects, again, there was a 60-day hold on that from the council at the last meeting. So we'll look at that at like July or August when that 60 days is up. So
Okay.
that's all I had.
All right, with no further business, meeting adjourned.
Bad?